Hello, I'm Frank Mitchell with a shining city on a hill.org. We're doing a series here on the end times and how events in history as they've played out over the last 30 or 40 years are without question fulfillments of particular Bible prophecies concerning the end times. And in my opinion, these are the final occurrences of the fulfillment of these prophecies. It is possible that we could have a new world order 100 years from now and all this stuff goes on forever. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the end time beast state, Leviathan beast state, is Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. Certainly they're fulfilling the prophecies, and we don't need to do it all over again. Of the Leviathan worldwide humanistic beast state. Certainly the mainline Protestant denominations that are endorsing this stuff, that are in apostasy, are fulfilling the Whore of Babylon prophecies. That can't even be disputed, and they see the enemy to be traditional Christians. All this is straight in the book of Revelation. It's happening every day in the newspaper. Traditional Christians are called, quote, fundamentalists, which means they believe in the fundamentals of the faith. That's Orthodox Christianity, or they're considered to be bitter clingers, clinging to the truth of the Bible. Can you imagine such a thing? Or they're considered to be, and hence they are deplorable, basket of deplorables. Those are the three. Those are the current attacks, and Christians are being currently marginalized in American society because they are not politically correct, which is part of the oppression of the one world government. But it's being implemented socially, not politically and legally in many cases. Although you can lose your job for being politically incorrect in some cases, or in some countries you can be fined or even jailed. Okay. You don't have freedom of speech and freedom of religion to say politically incorrect things. Okay, that's pretty obviously happening now. That's not debatable. And I think that this is it. That's the fulfillment of Revelation chapter 17. The same thing holds true with the fulfillment of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 with Carter. Carter is a man of lawlessness because he embraces agape love as lawlessness as true Christianity. And it sounds so flowery and utopian that he sells it in the church, presents himself before the people of God, and they vote for him by the millions. Until he goes to the Southern Baptist Convention, which is in the process of reasserting traditional Christianity, and they are offended by his 1978 speech promoting Gnostic Christianity as love as lawlessness for the individual and for the state to do an unjust or lawless social justice of economic wealth redistribution. Social justice, again, is wealth redistribution. There are different types of social justice. There's liberal social justice, radical Marxist social justice. Liberal social justice wants to redistribute wealth to make us all comfortably middle class, whether we work or not, as a human right. And when that right is being fulfilled, that's justice, social justice, economic justice, or distributive justice. The purpose of the state is to hand out money. People have money because the state hands it out. No, that's not how people have money. People have wealth. People have wealth by working and having a growing economy. And in some cases, the state may need to do some charity. I think that's perfectly fine. We call that a safety net. But that's not the function of the state, and that's the exception rather than the rule. In social justice theories, wealth redistribution is the primary purpose of the state, and that's the rule, not the exception. And the social justice theories got into the churches in the 1960s and 70s, and all the churches, thinking they were preaching a Bible-sound justice, started preaching out of the pulpit social justice, social justice, social justice, social justice. And then what happens is you have political leaders come along who are saying, I'm running for office, I'm presenting myself before the church with the false Christianity of Gnosticism, and I'm doing social justice. And all the people in the pews who've been hearing social justice sermons for decades think that people like Carter or Obama or Clinton, because they're doing social justice or economic wealth redistribution, or they're against, quote, trickle-down economics for pouring down wealth, redistributing wealth by pouring it down, they are thought to be true Christians. And they deceive many, and people vote for them by the Christians, people of faith, vote for them by the trickle, by the millions. Okay? Now, the fact is, there are many antichrist being false and counterfeit, against and counterfeit. Okay, against means that you're lawless. Counterfeit means that you're pretending to be the real thing. Okay, Obama comes along, and he does, Barack Obama, the Dastey of Hope, he does a different type of counterfeit Christianity. which is black liberation theology. You can read it, but now people say, how do you know that? Well, I read the book. Maybe if you read the book, you'd find that out yourself. Okay, he doesn't describe it by name as black liberation theology, but he describes the substance of it as what he believes, and that's black liberation theology. And the same way that Jimmy Carter doesn't say, I'm a Gnostic liberal Christian. He says, I'm a true Christian, but the true Christianity he outlines is Gnostic liberalism. The same way that Barack Obama says, I'm a Christian, and the Christianity that he outlines is black liberation theology, which is a radicalized liberalism. Okay, liberation theology is a Christianized Marxism. Christianized Marxism, and black liberation theology is race-based Christianized Marxism. So it's race-based. Dictatorship of the people of color rather than just simply the dictatorship of the proletariat, as in Marx. Okay, now, Obama, as Carter, fulfills not just there are many antichrists, many false prophets. In the end times, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, we have a condition on earth where the political situation is that we have political leaders going into the churches presenting a false Christianity. Basically, you shall be as gods, or the person is himself claiming himself to be God as part of his Christianity. There could be seen as two different things there, but they're both interrelated. Carter was not a cult-like figure, as we would say today. Obama proved to be a cult-like figure as well as a false Christian, with his false Christian message that offended traditional Christians, the same way Carter did with his Gnostic Christianity. Black liberation theology is an offense to traditional Christians. But it's part of the false Christianity that becomes the whore of Babylon that embraces the end-time Leviathan beast state that is essentially the same thing as Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, whether they're actually the Leviathan beast state or not. I think they are. Maybe they're not. Maybe there'll be another Leviathan beast state later on in history. I don't think so. Okay, but Obama, with his black liberation theology, is taking Carter to another level. Okay, in my opinion, Carter fulfills all the prophecies for all intents and purposes of the man of lawlessness, with his agape love as lawlessness Christianity, and his false Christianity of Gnosticism in the church as true Christianity, and being you should be as gods. He fulfills that himself. Carter does. He could have been the man of lawlessness, the final man of lawlessness. If you just use 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 as your reference for defining the man of lawlessness. And if Reagan had won and set up just and righteous states and shining city on a hill, and the Cold War ended and the whole world went into peace, justice, and righteousness with free states all over the world, with the fall of communism, the evil of communism, then we would have the 1,000-year reign of Christ right there. And Carter would have been the last man, a great man of lawlessness. He would have been the Antichrist, because he fulfilled all the prophecies in 2 Thessalonians for all practical purposes. But he didn't. We went into the New World Order and then Agenda 21, and which comes up with a whole new set of problems. But Obama and Carter and Clinton, both Clintons, are following the pattern set down by Carter to go before the people of God with their false Christianity, which is a form of New Age Christianity, or you shall be as God's Christianity, or Christian liberalism, Christian Gnosticism. Man is the measure of all things. It's a humanistic Christianity, as Adrian Rogers said to Jimmy Carter. You're doing a humanistic Christianity, and Carter thought he was nuts. No, everybody knows that if you're doing false Christianity, it's a form of humanism. Hello, this is standard theology for the person who knows the Bible. So all false Christianities are a form of humanism, and all false religions tend to be a form of humanism, spiritual humanism, not necessarily secular humanism. So New Age is a form of humanism. You should be as gods is a form of humanism. It's all Luciferian against God and his authority and exaltation of self as God. That's Lucifer. You should be like the Most High God. Try to be like the Most High God. But that's the spirit of Lucifer, of lawlessness and of Lucifer. That's the spirit of Antichrist. But there's the Antichrist in Scripture is a guy at the end of time who is a political leader who exploits this false Christianity and deceives many with his rhetoric. Agape love as lawlessness sounds so Christian and loving, and people vote for Carter by the millions, when in point of fact that's a form of lawlessness. Barack Obama's black liberation theology, to make us all equal by having wealth redistribution of the state, sounds so inspiring and Christian, and it's not, and people vote for that. It's lawless. People vote for that by the millions. They're deceived. But they both, Carter and Barack Obama, succeed only because they get into the church, present themselves as true Christians. They're not going into the church to offend people. They are deceived themselves, tragically. Carter's a very deceived person, and it's not an evil person, he's just deceived. Obama's deceived. He thinks black liberation theology is a real thing. He goes in the church and promotes it, and everybody goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And they vote for him. Carter goes in the church and does Christian liberalism, Gnosticism, agape love is lawlessness, and people go, yeah, 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 that's inspiring, and they vote for him. They're all conceived. It's all a big confusion and deception. Okay. But that's what prophecy says is going to happen, and lo and behold, it's happening. The interesting thing is there are prophecies in Daniel that parallel the prophecies of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And this is in Daniel 11. This is well known. In Daniel 11, they talk about this Antichrist figure going into the temple. Again, it's the church. It's not going to be the physical temple. And proclaiming himself as God as well. And sometimes Christ called it the abomination that causes desolation. And a lot of times people have used the model. There was a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes who lived at the time of the Maccabees, and he conquered Jerusalem, and he sacrificed a pig on the altar, and that was considered to be going into the temple and doing an abomination that caused desolation. And there was always a parallel to the end-time Antichrist going into the temple and doing something that's an abomination, which is setting up a throne and setting himself on it as king, a god, and that's a parallel to Antiochus Epiphanes in the end times. That's the usual interpretation. I think that that's wrong in that there is a parallel, but the end time Antichrist figure is in the church not as an overt abomination. It is an abomination, but it's an abomination that is pretending to be the real thing, and the churches fall for it. Except when Carter gave his 78 speech to the Southern Baptist Convention, they didn't fall for it, and they were scandalized by it. But the rest of the church, the mainline denominations, did fall for it, and they think he's a great Christian leader. And he had a big falling out with Adrian Rogers. Jimmy Carter did, and it ran all the way until Adrian Rogers' death. Okay, so the same idea of this false leader in the temple before the people of God doing something that's an offense to God and is proclaiming man as God is what is in Daniel as well. But Daniel doesn't have the really important stuff like lawlessness. The mark of the Antichrist and all of false Christianity and all Luciferian stuff is lawlessness. That's the key. It's not in Daniel. Daniel has some secondary things that most people have found very confusing for the guy that goes into the temple proclaiming himself as God, or a God-like Christianity, if you will. And it says that this guy who goes into the temple and does this stuff, this is Daniel 11:37, very famous passage, and it's a bit confusing, and it's secondary, and the reason why I consider it to be secondary is there's so much dispute over how to interpret it. Neither shall he, the Antichrist figure that goes into the temple, regard the God of his fathers, nor shall he regard the desire of women, nor shall he regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above them all, just like the guy in 2 Thessalonians 2. And you can argue how much Carter was saying that of himself or not. I think not so much of himself, but his Christianity was a New Age Christianity, whether he was saying it of himself or not. But in his estate, in the Antichrist estate, or in his office in government, he shall honor God, the God of forces, and he shall honor a God his fathers knew not, with gold and silver. Okay, now, the fact is, Carter doesn't fit any of that. Okay, but Obama does. Obama takes this to a more complete level, although they're all a type of the actual final guy. Which one actually plays out to be the final guy doesn't matter. And this takes it even further than Hillary does. Hillary takes it further than Carter, and Obama takes it further than Hillary. Because Obama does not regard the God of his fathers. Obama's not a Muslim, right? Obama's not a Muslim. He's an atheist. But so it reads. Don't take my word for it. Read that STFO. He's a neo-Marxist atheist. Marxist was atheism. His mother was atheist. His father was an atheist. Okay, so he does not regard the God of his fathers, nor does he regard the desire of women. This is a very disputed verse about the Antichrist. But Obama does not regard the desire of women. All right. Because he's not a Muslim, but he's a Muslim apologist. He's always telling us how great Islam is, even in a correct way. He's a Muslim apologist. And nothing disregards the desire of women more than Islam. Okay, I mean, Obama's probably in the West, not in the Muslim world, but in the West, Obama's probably the greatest advocate of Islam ever, and the greatest, and hence the great traditional Islam, not modern-day moderate Islam, but radical Islam that disrespects women. He's one of the greatest advocates the West has ever known, because he's an apologist for traditional radical Islam, not Quranic Islam, not violent Islam. Obama is not an apologist for violent Islam. He's an apologist for Quranic Islam that disregards women. The modern moderate Islam does not disregard Islam, but that is not historical Islam. So there are a lot of Muslims who love women, but they're not doing the Quranic version of it, which is what Obama promotes. Nor does he regard any God. He's an atheist. Well, Obama's an atheist, he says in his autobiography. Okay? He'd be a citizen of the world atheist, but decides to join the Black Liberation Theology Church to promote his political agenda of Jeremiah Wright's church. But in his office, he shall honor the God of forces. The God of forces, the God of military might, the God of the sword. And even though he's an atheist, in his office he honors the God of the sword. Who's the God of the sword? That's Allah, of course, I would say pretty clearly. And he will honor a God that his fathers knew not. The God of his fathers was Allah. But he honors a God that his fathers did not know, which would be Jehovah. And he honors him with gold and silver in his office, even though he's actually an atheist. How does Obama honor the God of Christianity? He does, with gold and silver. He implements all kinds of programs in America of social justice, immigration, and so forth, with tremendous amounts of money, tremendous amounts of debt, in the name of traditional American values of America. That's what we're saying. In order to uphold our traditional American values of the God of America, we have to do all these radical social programs. So he's honoring, in a sense, in his office the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, with vast amounts of social justice, wealth redistribution. He's not doing wealth redistribution in the name of Allah. He's not doing wealth redistribution in the name of atheism. He's doing wealth redistribution in the name of Black Liberation Theology, which is about wealth redistribution to make us all equal. And every one of the speeches, from the very first speech to the current day, was about social justice domestically and internationally of a neo-Marxist sort in terms of liberation theology of the South America, which has been denounced by every pope until this current pope, who has embraced the social justice of liberation theology, which is a false Christianity. So this complex relationship of what Obama believes is much more complicated than what Jimmy Carter believes. Jimmy Carter's just a flat Gnostic, liberal Christian who's rejected the fundamentals of the faith for agape love as lawlessness. Obama is a much more complicated figure, bless his heart, because he had a very tragic childhood with a father that was very radical, his mother was very radical, and he has to put all these pieces together as best he can, and you kind of almost feel sorry for the guy, really, because of the tragedy of his childhood and his parents. But be that as it may, he gets involved with this neo-Marxist atheism, eventually winds up joining the Black Liberation Theology Church, running for president, and then he presents himself in the church promoting a Black Liberation Theology, Christianity. Got to go. And then once he's president, he starts doing an apologetics for Islam that are not accurate. Islam has it may have some good things about it, may have some bad things, but Obama promotes Islam in a false way, given its historical track record, even though it has a lot of good stuff about it in its modern-day moderate versions. But who knows what version someone is the problem. Okay, but in a crazy way, all that stuff's in the Daniel prophecies, as well as the God of the sword, forces, military force, which is crazy, but there it is. Okay, so life gets very confusing. But the key here is the man of lawlessness is a person who's in the church promoting himself as a Christian when he's a false Christian, and his true Christianity is being denounced and attacked. And the political agenda is one of lawlessness, usually one of social justice lawlessness or moral lawlessness and homosexuality and abortion. All that's lawlessness. We want to look at the New World Order next time. I meant to go there this time, and how the New World Order of the Bushes relates to Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 next time, I think is what we'll do, so join us then.